Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Mission Critical. Make sure to hit like below and subscribe for more updates from our show. Let's get into it. Hi Deanna, how are you?
Good, Lance, how are you?
It's so nice to have you in the studio for us to be chatting in like an official capacity versus just, catching up as friends in the industry. Mm-hmm. How have you been?
I've been really well, thank you for asking.
Well, I am really excited because I've wanted to talk to you about all the work that you're doing with your team and just the incredible visibility and community building that you've done through Real Asian. But why don't we start off with, for people who may not be familiar with Real Asian, how would you describe what the festival actually does beyond just screening films too? What's the bigger picture and what's the bigger kind of platform that has been cultivated over the years?
Right. So I'd say people in Toronto know of Toronto or think of Toronto as a city of film festivals, festivals and film festivals in particular, home of the big one, TIFF. But I think they've been around. I think every single week there's a film festival practically. But Real Asian has been around for nearly 30 years. This is actually going to be our 30th year. And we exist as a platform to showcase work by filmmakers of Asian descent from Canada, the U.S., and around the world, just as a place to tell our stories and as a place of community to watch our stories together, but also to share our stories with the wider community.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And also just as you say, like community, like bringing people together through a shared love of filmmaking and film, and like just the incredible number of stories and the nuance that can also be communicated through film too. So that's an incredible, and 30 years is also huge too, which I want to also talk about later. So in your role as executive director, what does it mean to be responsible for a cultural institution that really carries, collective memories of so many different communities and the experiences of those communities?
Yeah, it does feel like quite a responsibility. I have to say, it's a crowded playing field, and I want to go back to the reason why we were even started. As you may or may not know, the film festival was started by Anita Lee, and Anita is now the chief programming officer at TIFF. But when she started out in the industry 30 years ago as a producer, she discovered that when she took her first major feature film down to the States, there was actually a community of Asian film festivals that she took it to. Big ones, the oldest one in San Francisco, LA, New York, and realized that what she found there was a community that was very supportive. And then she came back to Toronto, determined to start one, build that community that exists now. And so, over the past 30 years, things have really changed. Back then, she would often be the only Asian face in the room at industry events. And when we were watching TV, growing up myself in the 70s and 80s, all you would see on TV is you would be starving to see an Asian face on television. And I don't know, this might be a long answer, Lance.
I like long answers.
Okay.
And anecdotes give me all the things.
Okay, get ready. So, I was the type of person who would be constantly looking for an Asian face on screen. And I would always be really excited. But, sometimes all you would see is like the person on a Calgon commercial. Does that familiar to you at all?
Yeah.
And though the couple in this particular commercial is really exciting to me because they were owning a laundromat, but they also didn't have an accent. And that was actually, for some reason, very important to me. It made me feel seen.
Yeah.
And they weren't being ridiculed, and they weren't like inhabiting some stereotypical
like
role.
a caricature.
Exactly. They weren't being made fun of. And thinking of how rare that is on television, I'm just going to tell you the positive people I saw. So there was a show called Quincy in the 70s. Also, Robert Ito was like a Japanese American doctor on that show, and even on Falcon Crest, which is a soap opera. Not as popular as Dallas, but followed Dallas. There was a character named Chow Lee. And he played like a butler chauffeur or something on the show, but he didn't have an accent. And he was treated with great respect, even though he was sort of a servant on that show of rich people. He was treated, as sort of almost a confidant of the main character.
Right.
So I was searching for characters like that on the screen when I was growing up. And to go from that to now, it's been such a sea change. Like, I feel like, the filmmakers in our community that are working now, they've had, a lot of people coming before them that had very little in the way of mentorship and to follow.
Yeah.
And we, as a community, we're trying to build up the resources to help them get to, the place we are today, if that makes sense.
Of course, yeah. When you're talking to the filmmakers, and not just the filmmakers too, I guess, like the actors or the other people that really are in that system, what are some like through lines that you see in the conversations that you have with them in terms of what they want to see in the world and what they want to put out in the world because they didn't have it? Like, what are some of the similar themes and the similar kind of that thread that's like connecting everyone together?
I think it feels like people are still sometimes fighting the same battles. I think we've made so much headway. Just in terms of, like if you've been in this business long enough, you know that when you're trying to make your story, there's always somebody telling you, oh, you should change this character or that character. Like if it's an Asian family, why can't they be white? Or, if it's one Asian character, there has to be a reason for them in the producer's mind or whoever that there's a reason that they're Asian. So they're a Chinese delivery person or a restaurant owner or whatever.
Right.
But I think
it has to be justified.
There has to be a reason for them to be Asian. And I think we're so much beyond that now. But I also feel like one false move and we're going to be back to, Simu Liu's latest movie failed, therefore he can't, be a hero in the next action movie or something like that. I feel like that we're always kind of on that precipice, even though we've made all this.
Meanwhile,
progress.
You also have other movies that are led, and tentpole movies that are led by non-Asian characters who also are not able to deliver whatever box numbers are not, obviously it is a, it's what's the word?
It's an unlevel playing field.
Yeah.
Sure. It's a double standard.
Double standard, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And like those actors and actresses get those roles returned, and come back into those roles multiple times a year or those offers often, even though we're measuring them. Are we measuring them by the same standard? No, right?
Right.
So that's interesting to see. And so do you see the evolution of that discourse? How have you seen that conversation change over the years?
I mean, again, you go back so many years when the Joy Luck Club came out more than 25 years ago now. Everybody thought, wow, this is going to be such a game changer. All the doors are thrown open. We've got all these Asian stories, all these women and telling their story. Amy Tan wrote the book and the screenplay, et cetera, and then what happened after that was it felt like a whole lot of nothing. There were things that happened, but it still felt like people really had to still struggle to get their films made. And they still had something to prove. And I guess I'll skip to, I don't know, now I've forgotten the year, but the year of Better Luck Tomorrow. Let's talk about that movie. So I was actually just at Sundance. And Sundance is where Justin Lin's film, that breakthrough movie came out. And you know what it was about. It's about, these Asian American high school students that were selling, exams answers to their friends to make money. And I think they got into drugs. I can't remember everything about it, but it was this phenomenal hit at Sundance. But during the Q&A, somebody, a critic, a white critic, stood up and said, "Oh, how can you make a movie like this? Your families would be so ashamed." And then it was just flabbergasting. And then Roger Ebert, it took him to stand up and say, "Hey, they can make whatever story they want. This was a good movie, and why do they have to be representative of their community? Why do they have to serve a good example? Why? Because they're Asian?" Right. So that's the sort of stereotype that you also had to break through, this model minority.
I was just about to say,
that meanwhile, our Asian communities are extremely diverse, and there is not just one type, and there's so many multitudes of stories that deserve to be told. And that was the breakthrough, I think.
Going back to kind of your role as well at the festival, in what moments do you feel like you're a builder of culture or a guardian of culture or a disruptor of culture? Like, in what moments do you feel like your role shifts between those kinds of different identities, if they do?
I think one of the things we do that maybe people don't know is that we have a program called Unsung Voices. It's been around for 15 years. And it's a free film production program, 6 weeks long. People from across, young people for ages 19 to 29 apply with, a short story that they want to make into a film. Mm-hmm. And then we mentor them, and then we take them through the process of making a film. They if possible, they crew on each other's films. And then at the end of the summer, they have a film that we will then show at Real Asian as one program, the Unsung Voices program. And that program, I feel like is so important in so many ways. We have people that have gone through that program that have come back and mentored, and some of the films in those programs have gone on to other festivals, have won awards, are shown on Air Canada, because that's one of the prizes that can be won by short filmmakers, not just from that program. But in terms of building a community, this is one way that we keep filmmakers in our community giving back and helping people to come up.
Yeah, keeping that momentum
keeping
going.
them momentum. And I hate, one of the, success stories we always bring up is like Simu Liu actually did this program. You know that because actually when we met you was when you were at the head of that magazine.
Bay Street Ball.
Yes.
Well, and this is the same magazine. We just changed our name,
right.
actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But yes, that does seem like it was
2019.
Another lifetime ago.
It does.
Pre-pandemic.
That's why. I can't remember. Christine was, anyway. So he was on the cover of that magazine. He came, I think, to our TIFF party that year. Yeah. But he, when he was doing his own transition from, I don't want to be an accountant, I want to try acting. He answered a Craigslist ad, I think, for one of our Unsung Voices filmmakers who was just looking for an actor, and he acted in a film. And then the next year, he actually did the program. So that was back in around 2013. He produced his first film. So I always feel like Real Asian could take credit for kickstarting his career. I don't know if he would say the same, although we're mentioned in his book. You can cut in
opening doors, yeah.
Yeah, opening doors. I really think that...
And that next generation of talent and voices, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we exist to help, especially, filmmakers, young people in our community. Arts is not encouraged. We made this youth production program, top age, sort of the high end age is 29, because we recognize that there are people who may have embarked on their career in law and thought, I still want to try to make that first film. And so here's a way that we can help them to do it.
Yeah, that's so great. And also, understanding the cultural nuance of the expectations that are put onto our community in terms of career paths, and giving that chance to open those doors and just try it out.
Exactly.
Yeah, and everyone has stories to tell too. That's the thing, and how those stories have evolved from representation and capturing our cultures, which still exist today, but also just wanting to tell stories regardless of what your heritage or what your background, and just Canadian or North American storytelling in general.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody should have that same chance to tell whatever story they want.
Yeah. What was your first experience with the festival? Do you remember like the first screening you went to, and like the first kind of moments that really really kind of made an impact for you?
Well, this is going to age myself, but I do remember, I actually don't remember the very first screening. I remember I had just moved here. I'm from Winnipeg. And I was walking down the street, and the Bloor Cinema was called then, Hot Dog Cinema. I saw a poster for the Real Asian Film Festival, and it just sounded right up my alley. So I just went by myself, and I know that the film Yeoh by John Cho was in it. Again, it was a film about Asian high school students that were, up to no good. That film, I remember seeing, if not at Hot Dogs, at the Royal, one of those two theaters. Yeah. Anyway, I just remember all this feeling of being surrounded by all these Asian people that I didn't know. And that was, so for me, I grew up in Winnipeg, but my parents, there weren't too many Asians there in my neighborhood, but my parents helped to start a Chinese school. They created a community for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it still exists now, however many years later. And so I knew I had a big community of Asian people that I would see regularly, even if it wasn't at school. I had to go to Chinese school every Saturday. We had sports, we had classes, and so whenever we went out to dinner, people would know my parents, for example, like any Chinese restaurant. So I knew community. But for me to come here and see that many Asian people that I didn't know, I really wanted to be a part of it. Yeah. So even though I was by myself, I went to the party afterward, and I remember eavesdropping and listening to people talking, thinking, I really want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of this. And it's only as somebody who likes to consume media. Like I love watching movies. I'm not a filmmaker myself. Right. So anyway, yes, I remember very well.
I love that. And fast forward, and now you're the executive director at the festival, which is incredible. Is there anything that surprised you about the role when you first took it on?
Okay, so actually, my first time as ED was 2005.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and then you came back afterwards. I came back. Was there anything that surprised you about that role that you maybe did not? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you weren't privy to before, but what was the biggest thing that surprised you?
I don't know how to answer that question. It was really hard. I think in hindsight, I think now, why did I think I could do this job? Because, it feels like really naive thinking back 2005. I had a lot of experience in the not-for-profit world in Winnipeg, volunteering with my Chinese school and youth groups and things like that. But, running a festival, and, granted, in 2005, it was a lot simpler then, We still had email, but you weren't, I remember emailing myself from home, things I had to do the next day. Like I had,
social media landscape.
Social media didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. We were still postering to get the word out. We were still really counting on Now Magazine and getting a cover, something that didn't happen until the last year that it existed. Right. The very last issue, I think it was even. Anyway, I feel like, I don't know how to answer that other than...
Well, I guess you said that you didn't know, or what was it? Like, you didn't know what made you feel like you could take on a role like that. But then eventually, obviously, you learned the skill set and everything. What was it that made you not feel like you could do it or prepared? And then how did you find those skills?
I think it was a lucky time because I think it's much more forgiving when you're not, social media makes everything a little bit harder, I think. And you feel a lot more pressure to do things right the first time, and you worry that everything that you say is going to be just taken and blown out of proportion, out of context, and going viral. That's now. Before, I feel like there was a lot more forgiveness, and but what hasn't changed is the arts community is actually very close and helpful, I find, and I had a lot of mentors within the community at other festivals that still help me now. Even Imaginative is in our building. Inside Out, I really valued the camaraderie from those festivals, and and we're all fighting the same battle.
Speaking of battle, so what do you think that the public doesn't necessarily know or see when it comes to sustaining a festival like Real Asian?
Well, I think people do know that it is difficult to, fundraise and all the grant writing. The funniest thing is when the festival's over, everyone thinks, oh, you can relax, but it's like the work has just begun. You still have to report, and then
Right.
the pounding the pavement for funding and sponsorship begins, and it's a real grind, but. It all does become worth it when the festival comes around. I'm really proud of the community that we have built, actually. There people come back year after year, and they come just to see one another and to catch up, and as well as, there are people who don't care what the movies are. They know that they trust our programmers, and
Right.
they trust what they're going to see on screen.
So when you think about the core mission of the festival today, what role would you say Real Asian plays in an ecosystem where, a lot of Asian filmmakers still feel underrepresented, especially in mainstream funding and distribution?
Yeah, our work is definitely not done. Every time you think you've taken a few steps forward, you feel a little bit clawed back. And, 2020 was a time of, racial reckoning. And it felt at that time in the years that followed that, people and companies, the whole ecosystem finally understood what it was that we were fighting for, in that, the inequity had to be dealt with, and there were all sorts of programs that finally were erupted that, we're helping people from marginalized communities, us, indigenous people of color, helping us to tell our stories, understanding that the gatekeepers were maybe not understanding, or they were okay. So addressing the fact that, when Crazy Rich Asians came out, that they wanted to change the main character from white to Asian. And Asian to white. And I feel like...
I did not know that, really?
Oh, yes.
I did not know that.
Oh, really?
Even with a title like that and the whole book being...
Yes.
What?
He had to explain that this wouldn't work if she was white, because the whole point is like...
And the cultural... Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, the nuances.
I did not know that.
Well, yeah, so that's not that long ago.
Wow.
And that's still... and also, maybe I'll just bring another example. The movie 21?
Yes. Yeah.
So again, when they made that movie, they wanted to cast... I don't know if they wanted to make all the characters white except for one. But the whole point of that movie is that these again, university students, the reason why they were able to go to Las Vegas and cheat the system was because nobody was paying attention to them, because they were Asian, and they didn't, nobody suspected that they would be cheating,
Right?
And that was the whole point. And so again, there's this sort of fundamental lack of understanding often at the gatekeeper level.
And meanwhile, a movie like Crazy Rich Asians just proved that the commercial success of an entire cast that was built around the Asian community
could be successful, but again, that happened with Joy Luck Club, and yet it took another 25 years for Crazy Rich Asians. And I do think that after Crazy Rich Asians, the door did open, but part of it is all the platforms that are available now. That there are more, just places for people to watch.
Yeah.
Different kinds of media, and I guess
and provide feedback too, I guess.
Yeah. Different kinds of stories, and I mean. There's so much we could talk about. I mean, the whole K-drama landscape. That when I think back to the late 90s, there was a filmmaker named Sam Lee from our community. He made a short called How to Make Kimchi. And it was about how his mom, it was a documentary about his mom and her kimchi recipe. And he actually goes out to Chinatown and asks a bunch of non-Asian people, oh, do you know what kimchi is? And it's just no, I've never heard of kimchi. And it's just...
When was this?
late 90s,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
And I know, right?
Yeah.
You know, who doesn't know what kimchi is? It wasn't that long ago. And well, I guess that is like a long time ago now, but I still remember that film well. And to go from that to now K-pop is so popular that you've got people phonetically singing the lyrics to K-pop songs, you know, at BTS concerts. Is crazy to me.
Regardless of understanding the lyrics or not too.
Yeah.
Which really, I think, goes to show the universality of, you know, while we are able to, like, the community is able to tell stories that are specific to our communities, there's also sometimes a universality that kind of just talks about just the humanity of people. And there's, regardless of whether you're from the Asian community or not, there's something that you can still distill from these works of art, whether it's music or film. And it just goes to show that just because you're not from a community, you can those kinds of bodies of work are relatable and human and also commercially viable.
Exactly.
And it's really interesting given, you know, we're filming this the day after the Super Bowl and all the dialogue and the discourse around Bad Bunny and a lot of people not, you know, the critics not being able to understand the music. But does that even matter when you have, you know, this kind of like universal message and also just, you know, people listen to K-pop not knowing what they're singing. People consume other mediums not being familiar with the culture, eat food not that familiar with the culture. Does that really matter, right? And so I think it's just an interesting conversation right now, that people can be reminded that there is also something that can tie community together regardless of whether or not you can understand the lyrics or whether or not, you know, you're part of the community too, right?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that. That you know, the ultimate privilege is being able to just tell your story with those cultural nuances without having to take time out to explain them, and just, you know, I think that there's enough of an audience out there that will take that, I don't understand that, and they'll go and look it up on their own. Like, you don't have to spell it out for them, and I think that's really progress.
Yeah.
And that means that, you know, everybody is included. Everybody is the audience. And I wanted to give another example, actually, that comes to mind. David Cronenberg's M. Butterfly. I don't know if you ever saw that.
I haven't seen it, no.
Well, it's so, you know, it's based on the play, the music, Madame Butterfly, M. Butterfly, the play. Okay. It's Henry Huang. It doesn't matter. You can put that out for me later. Anyway, David Cronenberg's M. Butterfly. There is a scene in that movie. There's a conversation between sort of a privileged Chinese woman and her servant, and she's speaking to her, to the servant, the older woman, in Mandarin, and the older woman responds to her in sort of a Toisanese dialect, which is my grandmother's dialect, but like she seems to be trying to speak Mandarin, but it's clearly accented. But they just clearly don't understand each other. And I remember watching that and thinking, this movie was not made for me, because I know that they're not speaking the same dialect. But the average white person absolutely will not.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, I was not, back then, I was just, I don't know how old I was watching a movie, but I understood even then, like, you know, that, you know, the concept of a movie not being made for you. That's when you kind of realize, you know, I grew up here, but still this movie isn't exactly for me.
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's why, you know, when the reviews came out for Turning Red that one year, and there was this one reviewer that said, oh, clearly this filmmaker made this for her family and, you know, her community of Chinese Canadian friends, right? Because nobody could relate to, you know, like a teenage Chinese or American girl getting her period. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I remember some of those comments when that movie came out.
Yeah. So
Domishi's movie.
Yeah. So Domishi's movie. Yes, the idea that, you know, you have to be able to relate. There has to be somebody on screen looking exactly like you for you to relate. Well, you know, we grew up enjoying movies like Star Wars or whatever for decades without thinking to myself, I can't enjoy this movie because there's no Chinese Canadian girl
Yeah.
on screen. You know, that's what universality of storytelling is about. And it feels like it's just taken forever for people to realize that.
But you know what's also interesting too is like we interviewed Maggie Kong who is the filmmaker for K-pop Demon Hunters, and that was really interesting too because she talked about you mentioned like the burden of having to explain your culture to an audience that might not be familiar. And it was interesting because I think in that interview she was talking about letting the audience figure it out for themselves and giving them having enough trust in your audience to either figure it out if they're interested or to just enjoy it for what it is and not having to figure it out
Exactly,
too.
yeah.
Which was so refreshing because that burden of trying to explain your culture, explain your existence and your identity is exhausting, you know? And as an artist too, to be able to have to try to constantly try to relay those themes and translate, I guess, your culture it's a lot. So it's refreshing to see a body of work that gives the audience the benefit of the doubt to make their own decisions and do the work, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess on that note, like what does like a moment look like, you know, seeing Maggie being nominated for an Oscar and a movie like that, you know, that is so like K-pop coded, doing so well globally. What is like seeing that kind of representation, that kind of community, you know, seeing the embracement from the community? What does that mean to you?
It means so much, and I feel like we already kind of passed that threshold with Everything Everywhere All at Once, of course.
True, but you know what? Just on that note, sorry,
Yeah.
I was doing the. I was looking up like the Oscar winners and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I guess, both surprised and not surprised that Michelle Yeoh was only the second woman of color to win that award.
Right.
In the entire award history.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, like I mean, like that was basically the only reason why I watched the Oscars that year. But I was still surprised that was the case. And then simultaneously not surprised too. So, you know, Everywhere All at Once had such a huge cultural impact too. But yeah, I didn't mean to just
not at
interrupt.
all.
I was just like, that was like just like a big awakening for me because I was like, how?
She was only the second. Yeah, I know. So it feels like it's been just one record after another being broken the last several years. I mean, the first time early on, I think Minari was another film that had some nominees in categories that hadn't been ever gone to anybody of color, let alone Asian. Yeah, I think these moments are really important. We always joke, oh, does that mean our work is done? Of course, as a festival, but no, like it just means that finally there's some recognition and that we have license to keep going, and there's still going to be an audience and for our stories. I mean, it shouldn't even have to be said, but that's what it feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were talking about this year being a big year, 30 years.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's not an insignificant amount of time for a festival like this to still be so celebrated and to continue doing the work and making an impact. How do you honor the legacy of the past and also use that to really innovate and push forward for the future?
Well, actually, so it's going to be the year of the Fire Horse. And we established an award called the Fire Horse 5 years ago, named after Anita, who this is her birth year. Fire Horse comes once every 60 years, and when we established that award in her name on the occasion of our 25th anniversary, the whole point was we wanted to honor somebody in the community that both had, some sort of body of work that was excellent, of course, and not necessarily a filmmaker, but somebody in the media arts who had also broken down doors and helped people along the way. And so So and we named it the Fire Horse because the typical characteristics of somebody born in that year is, ambitious, headstrong, brilliant and but stubborn. All these characteristics are actually not associated, not good for a girl, a baby girl. That's another story altogether. But anyway, those are the characteristics of a fire horse, and so we've been really proud to honor people that have broken down doors in history. The first was, Keith Locke. He was sort of the first Chinese Canadian filmmaker. He was our inaugural winner. He worked with Michael Snow. He's been at the forefront of opening doors for people in this industry. Our second winner was Mary Stephen, who was she's a Montreal but Hong Kong-born filmmaker who worked with the French New Wave filmmaker Eric Rohmer. She's a really well-respected editor, and when we Relation actually discovered that her name was Mary Stephen, nobody knew she was Asian,
right?
let alone Canadian.
Yeah.
And then, we focused on her work early in mid 2000s, and then once we brought her here to introduce her to the community, she actually, Mary Stephen has mentored, many renowned, award-winning filmmakers in our community. So she was our Fire Horse winner, and then. Paul Wong, who is a Vancouver sort of experimental visual artist, Governor General Award-winning LGBTQ pioneer, and then last year Ali Kazemi, who's a documentary filmmaker. All of these artists have paved the way for the people below them. They've been inspirational, but they've also made sure that they help people,
kept the door open,
and that's what Anita has done as well.
Yeah.
For many people in the community, and I think that's really our role is to make people to understand that it's really hard to make work in this community. You can't do it alone, and that we're here for you. Yeah.
Talking about some of these award winners who are in different fields and titles, when we talk about representation, a lot of the times, representation in film, I'll say, or cinema, a lot of the times that feels like it's through the lens of like what we're actually physically seeing on the screen. But it's not always, I think, talked about enough about authorship and the people who are behind the camera and who are doing all the work. So how important is it to really build out that ecosystem of like representation for people who are the authors of these works too, and the filmmakers, not just the talent that we're seeing visibly on screen, which is also important too.
Thanks for asking that. That is actually something we've been focusing on the last couple of years as well, is recognizing that not everyone can or wants to be a filmmaker, like above the line filmmaker. We've been working with guilds and unions to also support people that like below the line hairdressers, production designers, set designers, and something like hair and makeup. It's so basic. I even know, when you're an Asian kid, maybe you don't know, like going to get a perm for the first time and they don't know what to do with your hair. The texture is completely different. Perms don't stay. And you don't really think about, like if there's, you're the only Asian person on set, are they going to know what to do with your hair? Are they going to know how to do your makeup? And so that's the sort of, we've been trying to also build the community there and let people try to help and recruit even, and let people know that these jobs exist. If they want to be in the industry, they don't have to and they don't want to act, but they want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Keeping that door open.
Yeah. Something we can do.
For sure. I love that. In your experience, like seeing all the films that have come through the festival, what are the types of stories that, come out of the diaspora that you think perhaps the mainstream still hasn't quite grasped and really fully understands in terms of the storytelling that's coming out of the diaspora?
It's interesting. I mean, something that comes to mind immediately is that there are Asian communities everywhere. So I think there was one particular year that we had a Vietnamese language film, but it came out of Poland, and it was about the Vietnamese community there, and it was super interesting. Taste of Pho, I think it was called. But then even here at home, we had a film called The Best Country in the World, and that was a Montreal Vietnamese filmmaker. And in that film, and this is something that most Canadians probably wouldn't have seen either, is that we had the Vietnamese community in French-speaking Vietnamese community in Montreal was the main family in that film. And I just love, I love that the expansion. I mean, Netflix is now, this was kind of before Netflix really blew up, I think, when that film was
right.
But just the idea that you can see other stories from other countries, and they're not all just because this is in Spain, that they're all going to be white Spaniards or whatever
right.
it is.
Yeah, like an Asian story doesn't have to be based in Asia.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we fight that battle to begin with, because when Real Asian first started, everyone's like, "Oh, I don't want to read subtitles." And we're like, actually, a lot of our films are made by American Canadian filmmakers who are telling different kinds of diasporic stories.
Yeah. Which kind of goes to show like a lot of the ingrained kind of prejudice and discrimination, if that's already like the first assumption, is like I don't watch movies with subtitles.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, where did we say that was going to even be the case for this? Like, give it a shot, right?
Exactly, and that is sort of that's sort of been our work too. Is to even educate our own community, and because a lot of our own community don't even realize that the films that they see here are not necessarily just going to be from Japan.
Sure.
Sure. And let me I'll say, my first year at Relation, I went and saw. At TIFF, I saw this film that's going to be at TIFF next week. Actually, it's called Eve and the Fire Horse. It's by Julia Kwan, Vancouver filmmaker, and so back around that 2003, 2004, she made that film. I saw it at TIFF in the industry, with an industry pass. And you know what those are like. They're people are really cynical. They're all like critics or programmers, and it was just so dead silent. And the movie came and ended, and there was like no reaction at all. And then a few months later, I went to see that film opening night at the San Francisco Asian American Film Festival, and the feeling, it was so electric, the audience. It was jam-packed. People were laughing at so it's about, it's a coming-of-age story about, a 12-year-old Chinese-Canadian girl in Vancouver and her sister. And I don't remember the exact storyline. Kind of doesn't matter. But, it was a family like mine. And that people understood and laughed at the appropriate places, or at the same places, and that it just elevated the viewing experience for me, and it made me realize that this is why you need to see a movie in the theater with your community, movies like ours, movies that you can see at Relation.
Yeah, there's like a hive kind of vibe, and like it's like you're all experiencing this piece of work together. Yeah. We were talking about, I think, even within our own community, the nuances of trying to make storytelling through the lens of like Asian filmmakers and storytellers, and talking about how diverse and nuanced it can be, and that it's not all just rooted in one place, or you can find unexpected stories in other places.
Yeah.
What do you think that storytelling from the Asian diaspora today really says about modern storytelling and what modern audiences are craving?
I mean, I think everybody, I think it's going to be changing. I think the world is so, it's such a depressing place right now for so many people. Mm-hmm. There's so much strife. There's so much, there's so many challenges that I feel like people do want more diversion, perhaps. Mm-hmm. I think they want to be taken away from, they don't want to be reminded of the reality, I guess. I'm not sure. I think that, yeah, this is a hard question to answer.
I think also just building on that too is that like, yeah, people want an escape, and that's
Yeah.
like, fantasy and all these kinds of things, like get out of this whole cultural mindset that we're in right now. But then also I think what I'm finding is really wonderful too is just a reminder of like the good things that are out there too, and just reinforcing that through storytelling, whether that's through media or film or fashion or whatever, or TV or whatever. Or social media too, is like just a reminder that like despite all these things that are awful that are happening, that there are good things that are a part of everyday life that we have to remind ourselves of too.
No, I know that's true. That is what people are looking for, the feel good stories in their feeds or whatever. And so I guess I like so many people have been, obsessed lately with heated rivalry. And I really find Hudson Williams such such a joy to discover him in this TV series. There's so much I like about it, and I love that I love that his Japanese Canadian mom. I love that they acknowledge that he's supposed to be like a good role model in this
model
world.
Minority thing too.
Yeah. True, but still, like let's acknowledge that's a reality, and that's what would be expected of him. But anyway, I just bring that up because it's just top of mind right now. Like that, this diversion, it really is. Such a feel good story in so many ways, breaking, hopefully the type of thing that can actually affect real change, in the pro sports community.
Yeah. For someone that's attending the film festival for the first time, what do you hope ultimately that they walk away from feeling after their first experience, whether they're a part of the community or not too?
Well, I think I hope that they'll feel that they can be a part of the community after that, regardless of their background. Because the whole point is that, although it's about filmmakers telling their own stories, the universality of stories. Yeah. The whole idea is that you should be able to find something that you can relate to, whether or not you come from the same background, and that you can enjoy, and feel like you're a part of the community just by watching a film.
Yeah, the humanity of
the stories. Of it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, if Real Asian Film Festival, does its job perfectly for the next 30 years, how do you hope it changes how Canada and wider audiences understand themselves?
Well, I guess my hope is that we will just become the place that that a certain type of great story is being told, and but that I don't think that we're not gonna exist just because I don't think there's going to be a time, frankly, that where all barriers are broken down. I feel like we're heading back right now, like kind of stepping back right now. Like all the sort of DEI initiatives that came into play during the pandemic are now being rescinded. In the time of Trump, it's starting more in the States than here, but we're feeling it up here too. I feel like even in the next few years, we're gonna see fewer stories from our community. Like we've had so many, choices for opening night, like in a way that we, in terms of Asian Canadian feature films, that we didn't have 10 years ago. I feel worried that opportunities are going to be fewer. But so my hope is that 30 years from now that we'll have bounced back from this kind of this downward trend that we're experiencing right now.
Well, hopefully everything it's like a pendulum swing. So everything kind of comes back, hopefully, and we're just at the end of that swing now, and it's time for things to come back. With that in mind, what do you think is the best way that audiences who are not necessarily in the film industry or not necessarily, holding the purse strings for funding and distribution, like a regular person in an audience, what's the best way that they can do to help filmmakers from within the community?
Oh, they can just show up, at the festival. They can become a Real Asian member for as little as $10 a month. The way to support is to continue watching, and our festival does exist as a year-round entity. We have programming year-round, things that people can come to support in small ways. Like you could donate and become a member, but you can also just by seeking us out and coming to like we're gonna have an Oscar party, for example, and but also during the festival, our programming is available online. So that's a sort of cost-effective way for you to participate too, even if you can't come downtown. If you're from a part of the country or a part of the city that's not easy to get down to our venue at Lightbox or Hot Dogs, which is where we open. That's a way you can help.
Great. I loved our chat.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much for coming in and talking about the film festival and the platform. I think it's such an incredible organization and everything, all the work that you're doing with the team. And so really appreciate you coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lance. I really appreciate it.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mission Critical. If you enjoyed our discussion, make sure to hit like below and subscribe for more updates from our show. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and go make something happen. We'll see you on the next episode.